Alright buddy, welcome back to another gaming video. So earlier this week we took a look at chapter 2 of this gaming series of games that could come out to the Sega Dreamcast. So with the first episode, which you can see the link down below, we took a look at Naomi-based architecture, which was cartridge-based initially. So Sega made an arcade system known as Naomi. So it was very popular, and the Dreamcast is based upon this Naomi architecture. So a lot of the best games that were from the arcades happened to make it to the Dreamcast system, but there was a lot of games that didn't. So at chapter 1 of this series, we saw the cartridge-based Naomi games, and chapter 2 we saw disc-based Naomi system games that didn't make it to the Dreamcast that would have been great additions. So if you can see chapters 1 or 2, see the links below because I have them listed there so you can go ahead and get caught up. So in chapter 3 we're taking a look at multi-cartridge-based Naomi systems. So this is primarily used for games that would have multiple screens. So just like in today with PC games, sometimes you have folks who have 2 or 3 displays for certain games to have a more panoramic view. So this is also available on the arcade architecture that Naomi had. So one classic example to where it was a multi-cartridge based system to where it actually came out on the Dreamcast was the Ferrari F355 series. And so we saw that first one. It was a fantastic racing game. And so we'll take a look at some of these additional games that came out on the system that would have been great additions for the Dreamcast. In addition, we're going to take a look at a stronger, beefier version of what Naomi was, but with additional components where essentially probably a Dreamcast port could have been accomplished, but it probably would have been a more watered down version than what the arcade had, which is not uncommon in such for a lot of the arcade ports we've had in the past. However, this is taking a look at the Hikaru system. So this was kind of Sega's bridge between Naomi and Naomi 2 architecture. So there were some great games that came out on the Hikaru system. So let's take a look at both arcade systems and see what games could have potentially come out on the Dreamcast. If you like what you saw from this episode as well as the prior episodes, feel free to subscribe. Take a look at some of my other videos on the channel just because I have similar videos of the same nature. And definitely keep your eyes open and click the bell for notifications because this is an ongoing series. I've got definitely more videos in the works, and so hopefully you learn something new, and hopefully we might see something happen someday and such. So there might be some of these games that may have come out on other systems. Might be a good idea for a video. Let's take a look and see. So sit back, relax, and go and enjoy the video. I'll catch you back in a few minutes. Alright, so the first game, of course, is a Sega-made arcade game known as Airline Pilots. So taking a look at it, there's nothing really on the system that really can compare to this arcade game. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the flight simulator that Microsoft made for PC was a smash hit. There's always been a fondness for flight as far as flight games go. You know, there was definitely on Super Nintendo and the N64 Pilot Wings. But this is essentially the closest thing that the Sega Dreamcast could have had with regards to a flight sim game. You're an airline pilot. I mean, you are flying jumbo jet 747. I mean, Sega went all out, even got, licensing for it to look as authentic to the experience. Now, granted, though, this arcade game was made, specifically for a Japanese audience, but it also came out in other locations. So I think would have been a great addition to the library because there really wasn't anything like it. Microsoft was already planning for the idea of the Xbox, to get into the game console business, to expand. So we weren't going to see any Microsoft properties make their way to the Dreamcast. Definitely the idea of being able to get behind aircraft and pilot it would have been a pretty awesome experience. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have the idea of this. Now, granted, though, having the arcade experience where you're flying through and being able to, control a plane with the same sort of controls, would that have been possible? Probably not, but they could have made do with regards to utilizing a Dreamcast controller and also using the flight stick that was available for other flight games. Next up is another awesome game which would have been perfect for the Dreamcast. That's by Sega's very own AM2 studio, known for many great arcade games, and that is the sequel in the F355 series. So we saw the original one on the Dreamcast, so the sequel would have been perfect on the Dreamcast. Granted, though, this is a multi-cartridge game just like Airline Pilots is, so it'll take in a lot more content. The difference, though, is that for the Dreamcast, you'll only be supporting one screen. While on the arcades, these were multi-screen games, and so they were worked all in conjunction to make that greater arcade experience. This game, its prequel, was available to play on a single screen, so Dreamcast could have completely handled this game as a sequel because it was based on Naomi hardware, and simply make it to where your view is from that single screen, and have it to where if you're turning and so forth, it goes, alternately. Could you focus as far as just simply on the middle screen that you have had in the arcade? Absolutely. This is a great arcade racer. It would have been a great addition to the Dreamcast library, and would have been pretty easy to do just because they made it happen beforehand. They definitely would have had the know-how to make this another great entry for the Dreamcast library. Alright, switching gears to the Hikaru system. Like I said beforehand, this was a processor base, a much more powerful version of the Naomi hardware, and we know that Dreamcast was less powerful than Naomi architecture, but it would not have been too far-fetched to see this come out on the Dreamcast, and this is Brave Firefighters. So those of you who are Saturn fans probably remember Burning Rangers, and I think had they just marketed this as perhaps Burning Rangers, this would have been great. And I think as far as the idea of the controls, looking at how they had a special controller, I think it certainly could have been adapted, utilizing the Y and A buttons to control the vertical positioning, use the right trigger to shoot, and certainly as far as using the left analog stick to control the direction. So I never got to play this in the arcades, but I think definitely this could absolutely have been a Dreamcast game. It would have been a great addition, similar to how we had some great shooters like Virtual Cop 2, House of Dead 2, Death Crimson, and Confidential Mission on the system. Sadly, the lone partnership between EA and Sega during the Dreamcast age was this EA NASCAR arcade game. And we know how well Sega knows racing games. We just saw F355 a little bit ago. We know about Daytona USA, Sega Rally. The list goes on and on. And so I think as far as with the Dreamcast, not having had EA support the hardware is really a shame. The fact that this game came to fruition would have been a great addition to the Dreamcast library, especially for NASCAR fans everywhere who wanted to race with their favorite racers, in a nice competitive environment. We know that this game would have been fantastic. Granted, though, it probably would have to be reduced, perhaps the polygon count, perhaps locking it in like 30 frames per second, and so trying to push for 60 frames per second. But I think definitely that the Dreamcast could have handled this. Definitely, as far as the experience, would have been something that would have been essentially one of the kind, because even though, Daytona USA, Daytona is a licensed property that Sega licensed with regards to be able to have an experience, this game adds something more to it because of the fact that you have actual authentic NASCAR racers that you can utilize. So even though if you think, okay, we have Daytona USA, there are a host of other racers, this is yet another quality game which would have had a perfect place to be a follow-up release after Daytona USA. Having this on the system would have been great for the Dreamcast. Alright, out of all the games in this video, if I had to choose a single game as far as which one I would have had, if I had my choice, it'd be a tough choice, but this is definitely up there with regards to perhaps my favorite to have had come out on the Dreamcast. There's one other one which I'll mention later, but definitely as far as this game, and we can see it in all of its glory, is yet another Sega venerable franchise made in-house, and this is the spiritual successor to Space Harriers, known as Planet Harriers. So taking the whole idea of the Space Harriers, you have this 3D kind of environment, flying through the skies, aiming for different things. I mean, essentially, I think it's the foundation for what we had games like Panzer Dragoon on the Sega Saturn. And I think definitely as far as Planet Harriers, I think had a great pop, great visuals. I think it would have been a perfect game to see for the Dreamcast. Definitely as a swan song, or just definitely the fact that it brought something different to the Dreamcast. We didn't have a plethora of games, like this. Did we have shooters? Sure, there were lots of shoot 'em ups. Did we have flight sims? Yes, we had flight sims, flight type games. Air Force Delta, Aero Wings, but definitely, this is something unique, one of a kind, and I think would have been a great addition. Sadly, as far as one game that was, hoped to be on the Dreamcast, or at least initially start development on the Dreamcast, which has a similar style of gameplay per se, would be the Xbox game Gun Valkyrie, which, I saw screenshots for that for Dreamcast development, which I thought would have been great. A lot of people didn't like Gun Valkyrie, they didn't like the controls, but I absolutely love that game. Great music, great action, and it took a little bit of getting used to controls, but definitely this game would have been absolutely out of control bonkers. And I think definitely the visuals, it would have been a great addition. Alright, remember when I was talking about if I had another choice, which one it'd be? Well, it'd be Virtual On Force. This game, I just love Virtual On. I'm not necessarily a great player at it, but I definitely enjoyed it. Loved it on the Sega Saturn. Loved playing Virtual On or Toyo Tangram on the Dreamcast, and I think just simply the follow-up would have been a perfect game to have on the Dreamcast. I mean, why not? If you happen to import the twin sticks from Japan, happen to get an adapter to be able to play on the Dreamcast, why not have one other game that actually can use those controllers to make it worthwhile? Certainly, as far as would have been a bit of a challenge, certainly, but I don't think it would have been impossible. I mean, definitely this game is not, huge open world game. I know there's folks who talk about, Grand Theft Auto 3 on the Dreamcast. I think it's been a far more challenging prospect than having a game like this. And definitely, Virtual On, when you think Sega, that's definitely one of the games that come to mind, especially because Sega's background as a great arcade game maker, and Virtual On is a great series. So I think having one extra release on the system would have been fantastic. Looking back, this wouldn't have been too far-fetched. This game came out in 2001. We saw Brave Firefighters in 1999, F-355-2 back in 2001, and Airline Pilots in 1999. These are all games that were ripe for the system based upon when the games came out on the Dreamcast. Definitely great arcade action. I think it would have been a welcome addition, being able to see all these mechs, enhanced graphics, and plus too, definitely there was time between when Virtual On Toyo Tangram came out in the arcades and seeing what kind of development improvements would have taken place, new features, and definitely 2-on-2 action, something that I think would have been fantastic. The Dreamcast was a pioneer system with regards to online play, and could you imagine being able to play this game either split screen, in your home, or with somebody playing online against other individuals in arena-based combat? This would have been definitely well worth it. May even tip the scale to being perhaps my number one choice to be a Dreamcast game from this video. Alright, last but definitely not least is our next game, and this is a Sega game that was licensed with LucasArts. And if you see LucasArts, you gotta think one thing, that's definitely gonna be Star Wars. So definitely the Star Wars Episode 1 craze was in full effect at the time when the Dreamcast was in its livelihood. And definitely, the next game is one that people probably think to themselves, hey, didn't we already have this game? And this game is Star Wars Racer Arcade. So we got to play, and on N64 and PC, there was Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. So the difference, though, is that one, that was made in 99. This game was made by Sega instead. It was made in 2000. So what happens when you put the arcade racing prowess of Sega and putting them behind a great property, a great franchise? They can do great things for it. And we've seen this, time and time again with regards to licenses. Sega's done this with Daytona USA. They definitely have done it with the Ferrari, with the F-355 series. And also, we've seen this one later on the GameCube when Sega was called upon to do the F-Zero GX game for the GameCube. Definitely a great game, licensed property, well known, and putting great work to it. Definitely, I think as far as having this game, a game like this, being able to have potentially arcade perfection, or at least near perfection at home, be able to play multiplayer at home or even online against other players, that would have been an awesome experience for Dreamcast players. So what do you think? I know definitely looking at some of these games, there were official Dreamcast magazines that were posting some of these games in the publications back 20 years ago of potential games that could come out on the Dreamcast. I remember in the United States, the official Dreamcast magazine had images of Planet Harriers. I thought to myself, gosh, a spiritual successor to Space Harriers on the Dreamcast, that would have been completely fantastic. And it's really unfortunate that we didn't get to see it. So hopefully someone with more ingenuity, maybe the homebrew scene, can make some of this stuff come true. Definitely there is emulation out there for the PC base to try to play some of these games, and certainly there's folks who want to have original hardware and be able to make this part of their gaming experience. So if you've had some of these gaming experiences, either going to an arcade, you play on emulation, or just simply found something interesting, go ahead and leave a comment. I love to read them. I love responding to them. And definitely I'll catch you next week with another video or two. We'll take a look and see. But definitely we'll see what other games could potentially come on the Dreamcast. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.